Atlanta is often called the Black Mecca of America. But when people talk about black wealth in Atlanta, most of the coverage fixates on celebrities, athletes, or viral success stories. What it almost never shows you is who actually controls the money, the land, and the systems, and how they built it. Today, I want to break down something most conversations completely miss. This story is not just about who is rich. It's about how wealth is structured, how it lasts, and why certain families quietly shape the city while others fade out of the headlines. We're going to look at Atlanta's most powerful families, old money and new money, and trace where their wealth really comes from. Private ownership, infrastructure, services people can't live without, and land that defines the future of the city. By the end of this video, you won't just know who's wealthy. You'll understand why this matters now, how Atlanta became what it is, and what that tells us about where real power is moving next. This is the real story behind the richest black families in Atlanta, the Black Mecca. I want to be clear that net worth figures vary, and some details around private families are estimates based on public reporting. Let's start with a family most headlines oversimplify, because the real story isn't about chicken sandwiches, it's about control. The first name on this list built generational power by keeping ownership private, margins disciplined, and culture non-negotiable. The Cathy family. The Cathy family owns Chick-fil-A, a privately held fast food giant founded in Atlanta and still controlled by the founder's children and grandchildren. In 2024, Forbes estimated the family's combined fortune at $33.6 billion, ranking them number 8 among America's richest families. The business remains Atlanta-based and firmly family-run. To understand why the Cathys are so wealthy, start with control and structure. Chick-fil-A is not publicly traded. There are no outside shareholders to dilute family ownership. The company has 3,000+ locations across the US and Canada and has kept its brand identity unusually tight for a chain that size. For example, staying closed on Sundays and enforcing strict operator standards. Leadership passed from founder S. Truett Cathy to his children, Dan Cathy, chairman, Bubba Cathy, longtime executive, and Trudy Cathy White, company ambassador, with Andrew Cathy, Dan's son, named CEO in 2021, signaling a third-generation handoff. Because the Cathys don't report earnings the way public companies do, most observers only see store lines, not the cash flow engine behind them. The brand's economics, high unit volumes, disciplined store count growth, and intense operator selection create resilient margins, even when growth cools from a sprint to a jog. Slower growth doesn't break the model. In 2024, Chick-fil-A's U.S. system-wide sales growth reportedly slowed to 5.4%, about $22.7 billion, its lowest rate in nearly 19 years. But a lower growth rate on a very large base still throws off major cash, especially with a capital-light operator structure compared to fully company-owned systems. The family's position at the top of Georgia's wealth rankings didn't change. First, a local diner becomes a chicken sandwich concept, 1946 to 1967. That concept scales regionally, then nationally, without giving up control to public markets. Then the family layers on brand discipline, menu simplicity, service culture, Sunday closure, creating outsized per-store sales. Each step keeps equity and decision power inside the family, so profits stay in the family too. In my view, the Cathy family illustrates how tight governance, patient expansion, and private ownership can build a fortune that's durable rather than flashy. Even in a slower sales year, the model works because it was designed to prioritize margins, control, and culture over speed. Chick-fil-A's system-wide sales were reported around $22.7 billion in 2024 US, with growth decelerating but still significant at large scale. Because the Cathys are private and culturally low profile, there isn't a lot of verified, public reporting about their personal luxury purchases, super yachts, art collections, etc. What is well documented are institutional scale assets and philanthropic platforms that signal their wealth and influence. The corporate campus and associated properties are signature, high-value assets tied to the family's core business. Private company, value not public. Though not a luxury item, the family's philanthropic institutions, notably WinShape, founded by S. Truett Cathy, represent enduring financial capacity, funding youth programs, scholarships, and faith-based initiatives across the Southeast. Philanthropy signals scale, even when luxury spending is discreet. The chairmanship, Dan Cathy, and CEO succession, Andrew Cathy, are part of a family office-style continuity that preserves wealth, arguably more valuable long-term than visible trophy assets. Public, reliable sourcing on specific Cathy family trophy items is scarce. Up next, we have the Cox family. They controls Cox Enterprises, a fourth-generation Atlanta-based conglomerate. Public estimates place the family's net worth near the high $20 billion. Forbes listed $26.8 billion in 2024. Other 2025 roundups put them around $27 billion, keeping them among the richest U.S. dynasties with heavy Atlanta ties. To understand the Cox family's wealth, you have to start more than a century back. The business began in 1898 when James M. Cox bought a small Ohio newspaper. Over generations, that base expanded steadily, first into publishing, then radio, then television. When the family relocated the company's center of gravity to Atlanta, they aligned themselves with a fast-growing southern city that rewarded long-term ownership and civic engagement. Today, Cox Enterprises is still privately held, headquartered in Metro Atlanta, and run by family leadership. Alex Taylor, a great-grandson of the founder, serves as chairman, president, and CEO, while other family members remain active in governance. The Cox family did not stay wealthy by clinging to one industry. They systematically rotated into sectors with recurring revenue and high switching costs. Cox Communications became one of the largest private broadband providers in the U.S., serving about 6.5 million customers across dozens of markets. Internet subscriptions replaced the volatility that once came with advertising-dependent newspapers. Cox Automotive now anchors the empire. Brands like AutoTrader, Kelley Blue Book, and Manheim sit directly in the workflow of the auto industry, serving dealers, manufacturers, and fleets worldwide. Manheim alone facilitates tens of billions of dollars in annual vehicle transactions and generates approximately $3 billion in revenue. This isn't consumer hype, it's infrastructure. While many media families decline with print advertising, the Coxes sold or spun down broadcast assets and doubled down on platforms that collect data, handle transactions, and charge recurring fees. Each shift reduced dependence on any single trend and increased predictability of cash flow. That's how the family stayed wealthy while others faded. In my view, the Cox family represents one of the cleanest examples of strategic adaptation in American family wealth. They didn't chase attention. They didn't over-leverage. They picked systems, broadband, auto transactions, data, and stayed patient while those systems became essential. This isn't flashy money, it's infrastructure money, and that distinction explains its durability. The Cox family is known for discretion, but decades of reporting show a consistent pattern. High-value real estate in and around Atlanta, including estate-level residences tied to family trusts and long-term holdings. Specific addresses are intentionally kept private. A dedicated family office, disclosed via Bloomberg, which manages investments, estate planning, and governance, standard for families at this scale. Corporate aviation and institutional-grade travel assets are widely assumed as operational necessities for a global conglomerate. But unlike owners such as Arthur Blank, the Cox family does not publicly brand or showcase yachts, jets, or trophy items. In short, their luxury expresses itself through privacy, access, and control, not spectacle. Cox Enterprises and the Cox family function as a primary engine for Atlanta's growth, exerting influence through three main pillars: economic stability, civic leadership, and physical infrastructure. As a major employer, the company sustains tens of thousands of local jobs and supports a massive network of vendors, making it central to the region's financial health. This economic power is bolstered by a deep-seated civic reach. The family has spent generations shaping local policy and public discourse, largely through their ownership of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and their 34 by 34 social initiative, which aims to empower 34 million people by 2034. The family's impact is equally visible in Atlanta's physical and institutional layout. Their corporate campus anchors the Sandy Springs business corridor, while their philanthropic arm, the James M. Cox Foundation, has provided critical funding for iconic projects like the Atlanta Beltline and essential healthcare facilities like the Shepherd Center. By driving innovation in the broadband, automotive, and clean tech sectors, Cox Enterprises does not merely operate within Atlanta. It serves as a co-architect of the city's identity, ensuring that the region's governance and infrastructure evolve alongside the company's global interests. If the Cox family represents Atlanta's mastery of information and infrastructure, the next family shows what happens when you dominate necessity itself. They didn't build wealth by shaping how people connect or trade. They built it by solving a problem that never goes away. The Rollins family. They built one of the most durable private fortunes in Georgia by owning Orkin, the largest pest control brand in North America. Their wealth flows through Rollins Incorporated, a publicly traded company the family continues to control. As of 2026, the combined family fortune is commonly estimated in the $7 to $9 billion range, depending on Rollins Incorporated share prices and family holdings. To understand the Rollins family's wealth, you have to understand what they chose to own. The family started in media and advertising in the mid-20th century, but their defining move came in 1964 when they acquired Orkin Exterminating Company in what's often cited as the first leveraged buyout in U.S. history. That purchase transformed the family's future. Rather than bet on advertising cycles or consumer trends, the Rollins family doubled down on recurring services: termite prevention, pest removal, sanitation, and environmental management. These are services people and businesses cannot stop paying for, regardless of the economy. By the time Gary Rollins and his brother Randall took control, Orkin had become the backbone of a much larger services empire. Here's what rarely gets highlighted. Pest control is boring on purpose. There are no viral moments, no cultural swings, no reinvention narratives. What there is contractual stickiness. Once a home, restaurant, hospital, warehouse, or government facility signs an Orkin contract, switching providers becomes risky and inconvenient. That creates predictable recurring revenue, low customer churn, pricing power during inflation, consistent cash flow across cycles. In 2023, the family sold roughly a 9% stake in Rollins Incorporated for over $1.5 billion pre-tax, yet still retained around 40% ownership in the company. That move unlocked liquidity without surrendering control. Textbook wealth management for a family dynasty. First, the family buys Orkin and commits to services instead of products. That turns pest control into a subscription business, long before subscription economics became fashionable. Those contracts finance acquisitions of regional and international pest control firms, expanding scale. Scale brings purchasing power, logistics advantages, and data, making it harder for competitors to catch up. Each expansion strengthens the base. Each downturn confirms the model. When markets slow, bugs don't. They didn't chase innovation rhetoric. They didn't diversify excessively. They focused on one essential service and executed it relentlessly. Their fortune doesn't grow by spikes. It grows by accumulation. And wealth built that way is extremely difficult to disrupt. They operate in 70-plus countries with 800-plus branches worldwide and millions of active service contracts. Rollins Inc. consistently reports multi-billion-dollar annual revenues, driven primarily by Orkin and international pest control operations. Unlike flashier billionaires, the Rollins family expresses wealth traditionally and privately. Large southern estates in Georgia and Florida tied to family trusts, private aviation used for global operations and corporate governance, marine assets via Marine Products Corporation, a Rollins-controlled boat manufacturing company, Chaparral, Robalo brands, which doubles as both an investment and lifestyle alignment. Multi-generation trusts designed to keep ownership consolidated. This is not trophy wealth. It's operational luxury aligned with business. The Rollins family functions as a quiet but dominant pillar of Georgia's economy, wielding influence through massive employment and recession-proof industries like pest control, Orkin, and logistics. Beyond the balance sheet, they shape the state's physical and social infrastructure through steady participation in commercial real estate and a stealth approach to regional business policy. Their legacy is cemented by multi-generational philanthropy, most notably in public health and education via the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory, ensuring their name remains foundational to Georgia's civic and financial stability. If the Rollins family represents wealth built on services people can't live without, the next family shows what happens when a single business breakthrough is turned into an entire public-facing empire. This is Atlanta wealth you can see from the street, from the stadium, and from the skyline. The Blank family. Led by Arthur Blank, co-founder of the Home Depot and owner of several major Atlanta sports franchises, as of 2026, Arthur Blank's net worth is commonly estimated between $9 billion and $11 billion, placing him among the wealthiest individuals and families ever tied to Atlanta. In 1978, Arthur Blank and Bernie Marcus were fired from their executive jobs at Handy Dan, a regional hardware chain. Instead of moving on quietly, they launched the Home Depot, betting that customers wanted warehouse-style stores with wide selection, lower prices, and knowledgeable staff. That bet reshaped American retail. Home Depot grew into the largest home improvement retailer in the world, eventually generating over $150 billion a year in revenue. Blank retired from day-to-day leadership in 2001, but he left with a massive equity stake that continues to anchor his wealth today. Here's what often gets misunderstood about Arthur Blank's fortune. Home Depot made him rich, but sports ownership multiplied his influence. In 2002, he purchased the Atlanta Falcons for roughly $545 million. 2 decades later, the franchise is valued in the multi-billion-dollar range. He later added Atlanta United FC, which became one of the most successful MLS franchises almost immediately. Owning sports teams isn't just about ticket sales. It's about franchise appreciation, media rights, real estate development, civic leverage. Blank used sports not as a hobby, but as a long-term asset strategy tied directly to Atlanta's growth. Unlike quieter dynasties, his fortune is meant to be seen, not for attention, but for alignment. His investments consistently merge business returns with public infrastructure, which is why his influence feels permanent. Unlike families who stay anonymous, Arthur Blank's wealth expresses itself visibly. Private aviation for business and league travel, luxury properties in Georgia and outside the state, ultra-high-end super yacht ownership, widely reported in maritime and business circles, ownership of elite sports facilities, which function as both assets and symbols. His approach to luxury mirrors his business style, premium, purposeful, and large-scale. Blank is also a signatory of the Giving Pledge and has committed to donating the majority of his wealth. Through the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation, billions have flowed into healthcare, including Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, education, veterans services, civil rights initiatives, and community development. This isn't end-of-life charity, it's strategic reinvestment, shaping Atlanta while he's still actively building. The next family represents something older and quieter. Wealth that helped build Atlanta before it was modern and then kept shaping it behind the scenes for generations. The Woodruff family, one of the most important dynasties in Atlanta history. While individual family members rarely appear on billionaire lists today, their control and influence over Coca-Cola during the 20th century and the massive philanthropic foundations funded by that wealth continue to shape Atlanta in 2026. This is institutional wealth, not lifestyle wealth. To understand the Woodruff's importance, you have to go back to 1919. That's when Ernest Woodruff led a group of investors that purchased Coca-Cola from founder Asa Candler. His son, Robert W. Woodruff, became president of the company in 1923 and remained the dominant force behind Coke for more than 5 decades. Under Robert Woodruff, Coca-Cola transformed from a regional beverage business into a global consumer giant. By the time he stepped back from leadership, Coke was one of the most recognized brands on earth. Here's what most people misunderstand. The Woodruff family chose permanence over prominence. Rather than build a dynasty centered on individual wealth display, they built foundations that outlived any one person. The Robert W. Woodruff Foundation and related family foundations now manage billions of dollars in assets, distributing hundreds of millions over time. These funds help finance Emory University's transformation into a global research institution, Woodruff Arts Center, Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, High Museum, Alliance Theater. Major expansions of healthcare systems including Emory Healthcare, civic projects that quietly stabilized Atlanta during its most volatile decades. This kind of wealth doesn't trend, it endures. In my view, the Woodruff family represents the highest economic tier of influence, even though it's the least visible. Their money doesn't sit in ranked net worth columns, but it determines what universities grow, which hospitals expand, and which arts institutions survive downturns. That form of power is quieter than billionaire lists, but it's arguably stronger. Historically, Robert Woodruff did maintain large private properties in Georgia, extensive land holdings, significant personal art and cultural patronage. However, by design, much of that wealth was given away during his lifetime, making the modern Woodruff legacy less about assets and more about endowment power. Their luxury today is institutional permanence. If the Woodruff family shows what happens after Coca-Cola becomes a global machine, the next family tells the story of where it all started. Before Coca-Cola was an institution, before it reshaped Atlanta's economy, there was one family whose money quite literally built the city's physical frame. The Candler family founded the Coca-Cola Company and used that early fortune to shape Atlanta's land, neighborhoods, and civic institutions. While their wealth today is far more fragmented than later dynasties, their historical influence remains embedded in the city's geography, universities, and real estate. Asa Griggs Candler, an Atlanta pharmacist, acquired full ownership of a struggling beverage formula, Coca-Cola, and aggressively marketed it. By the early 1900s, Coke had become one of the most successful consumer products in the country. Unlike later corporate dynasties, Asa Candler didn't keep Coca-Cola forever. In 1919, he and his family sold the company to a group of investors led by Ernest Woodruff for what was then a massive sum. That sale locked in the Candler fortune, but it also set the family on a different path than the one the Woodruffs would take. The Candlers turned brand wealth into land power. Instead of reinvesting deeply into Coca-Cola operations, the family redirected much of its capital into real estate development, urban planning, institutional giving, private land holdings. They built Candler Park, Druid Hills Estates, iconic structures like the Candler Building, major residential developments tied to Atlanta's early expansion. For a generation, the Candlers were not just wealthy, they were city shapers. Atlanta's growth patterns, elite neighborhoods, and early infrastructure followed the paths they financed. The Candler family represents a critical lesson in wealth history. They were early, they were right, and they were immensely influential. But they illustrate the difference between owning a system and owning a moment. Selling Coca-Cola secured generational privilege, but it forfeited the compounding power that later made the Woodruffs legendary. The Candlers helped build Atlanta, but they no longer control the economic engines that drive it. Historically, the Candlers owned large estates in Druid Hills, architectural landmarks, many still standing, private art, livestock, and land holdings, high-profile civic properties tied to Atlanta's identity. Today, much of that wealth has been sold, donated, fragmented through inheritance, and converted into non-liquid historical assets. The visible legacy remains, but the economic control does not. The Candlers matter because Atlanta would not look the same without them. They remind us that early wealth shapes cities. Land ownership creates long-lasting influence. Selling a world-changing company can cap a family's future upside. They are the origin story, not the ending. Number 8 is different. This is wealth created in one lifetime, built without inheritance, protected through ownership, and scaled into an institution that rivals legacy empires. Tyler Perry is a self-made Atlanta billionaire whose fortune is rooted in total ownership of his content, his studio, and the land underneath it. As of January 19, 2026, Forbes estimates Perry's net worth at $1.4 billion, making him the richest actor in the world and one of Atlanta's most powerful modern wealth creators. Perry's wealth didn't come from salaries, royalties, or studio contracts. It came from ownership scale. He owns 100% of the content he has created since the 1990s, including films, television shows, stage plays, and the Medea intellectual property. His Medea franchise alone has grossed over $660 million, with Perry retaining outsized profit participation because he self-financed and controlled distribution early in his career. This ownership model is the single most important reason Perry surpassed peers with equal or greater cultural visibility. In 2015, Perry purchased 330 acres of the former Fort McPherson military base in southwest Atlanta for roughly $30 million, later investing hundreds of millions more to convert it into Tyler Perry Studios. What that actually means, 330 acres, one of the largest production campuses in the United States, 12 sound stages, permanent backlot sets, and a life-size White House replica. More land than Disney, Warner Brothers, Paramount, or Sony studio lots. Privately owned, debt-light, and controlled by one individual, Perry became the first Black American to fully own a major film studio, turning Atlanta into a permanent production hub rather than a tax incentive outpost. In 2025, Perry filed plans to develop a 1.3 million square foot entertainment district adjacent to his studio campus, including offices, retail, theaters, and public space, signaling a shift from studio growth to city-shaping mixed-use development. That move places him closer to Arthur Blank-style civic ownership than traditional Hollywood production. Perry is not the richest family on the list, but he is among the most independent. Perry's ranking reflects new money power, not raw balance sheet supremacy. Families above him control tens of billions via inherited or multi-generational corporations. Perry built dynastic-style institutions in one lifetime. His wealth is fully controlled, not dispersed across dozens of heirs. That makes him the opening chapter of New Money Atlanta, not its endpoint. Tyler Perry showed how new money can be built at global scale through ownership of ideas and land. I am focusing on Atlanta here because it shows how wealth actually compounds in cities, not because these families are the only ones that matter. Number 9 proves something different, but just as powerful. That the most durable wealth isn't always loud, fast, or famous. Sometimes it's built quietly, one family at a time, in industries people can never opt out of. The Levitt family. They own and operate Gregory B. Levitt & Sons Funeral Homes and Crematory, one of the largest and most trusted Black-owned funeral service enterprises in Metro Atlanta. Founded in 1980 by Gregory B. Levitt Sr., the business remains fully family-controlled, with multiple locations serving over 2,200 families annually across the Atlanta region. Gregory B. Levitt Sr. learned the profession from his father, George W. Levitt Sr., and became a licensed third-generation funeral director in the 1970s. Gregory Sr. and his wife Betty opened a 5,000-square-foot facility in Scottsdale, Georgia, which still serves as the corporate office. Early growth came from reputation and word of mouth. In the 2000s, he built a 9,000-square-foot Decatur chapel that grew to serve 1,300-plus families per year. 2004, South Gwinnett Chapel, the only African-American-owned funeral home in that area at the time, built with larger visitation rooms and a 350-seat chapel. 2009, Buford Chapel with an on-site crematory, later sold to reallocate capital. 2014, a new Conyers location strengthened the Rockdale footprint. Their children, Gregory Jr., T. Lanier, and Dina joined operations, keeping ownership, client relationships, and service standards inside the family. Staff now exceeds 100. The Levitt business performs like infrastructure, not a trend. Families rarely switch providers, trust compounds over decades, and demand is non-cyclical. Owning their chapels, fleets, and facilities turns each location into an enduring local asset with predictable cash flow. In my view, the Levitt family exemplifies quiet, durable wealth, the kind built on service reliability rather than spectacle. It behaves like old money in its governance and restraint, but it is fundamentally new money, created within a generation, still expanding, and designed to last. Atlanta's earliest fortunes were built on land. Its modern fortunes were built on brands. The final name on this list brings those two worlds together, using new money to reshape the city's physical future. Egbert L. J. Perry. He is the chairman and chief executive officer of the Integral Group, a privately held, Atlanta-based real estate development and investment firm he co-founded in 1993. Integral is nationally recognized for large-scale mixed-income housing, mixed-use districts, and complex public-private redevelopments that reshape entire neighborhoods rather than single buildings. This is city-making capital, not headline-chasing wealth. Egbert Perry immigrated to the United States from Antigua and Barbuda as a teenager and trained as a civil engineer, BS/MS, before earning an MBA from Wharton. He entered real estate and construction in 1979 and over 13 years helped scale an Atlanta firm into the third largest African-American-owned construction and real estate company in the U.S. by 1992, with revenues near $200 million annually at its peak. That experience gave Perry two advantages: mastery of construction economics and credibility to work at neighborhood scale. In 1993, he co-founded the Integral Group with a mission to create value in cities and rebuild the fabric of communities, explicitly focusing on mixed-income, mixed-use solutions where markets had failed. Integral doesn't just build apartments, it masters complexity. Mixed-income housing integrated with retail, education, and services, public-private partnerships with cities, housing authorities, and healthcare systems, program management across demolition, environmental, entitlement, and phased build-outs, vertical integration, development, construction management, property, and asset management. That capability is why governments and institutions select Integral for high-stakes sites, where mistakes carry political, economic, and social costs. Integral is the master developer for the former Atlanta Medical Center campus, partnering with Wellstar Health System on a multi-phase mixed-use plan that includes housing, grocery/pharmacy access, and community resources. Demolition and site preparation progressed through 2025. 2026 is a planning milestone. First construction phases are expected post-2026. This project alone will determine services, density, and mobility for a critical corridor of the city. Integral participates in transformational projects near underground Atlanta, including senior housing delivering affordability at less than or equal to 80% AMI, reinforcing the firm's mixed-income playbook in the urban core. Integral is privately held. Its value is embedded in projects, not personal rankings. The firm has led billions in urban investments nationally over 3 decades, employing hundreds and coordinating capital stacks that outlive any single development cycle. Perry's influence is structural. Boards, including a past chair role at Fannie Mae, policy credibility, and the mandate to execute where others cannot. In my view, Egbert Perry represents the highest tier of new money power because it shapes systems, not seasons. When the question is, what does Atlanta become next? Housing, access, density, services. The answer often traces back to who can execute at neighborhood scale with public trust. That's Integral. The key takeaway here is simple. Atlanta's real power isn't measured by headlines or celebrity net worth. It's measured by ownership, private companies and IP, infrastructure, broadband, logistics, pest control, and land, the projects that decide where people live, work, and invest. Families and founders who control these levers don't just make money, they shape the city's future. This story is not over, and the next phase will matter more than the first. Old money dynasties proved how control and patience compound across generations. New money builders are now applying those same rules, keeping equity tight, buying hard assets, and scaling essential services to rewrite Atlanta's map in real time. If you understand this now, future updates will make much more sense.